You see Brittany, yes.
Okay. Oh, that's perfect. You guys are perfect.
Theater and rounds.
The theater and rounds. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
This is supposed to be here. That is our intern. We should sign. When Sarah asked, oh, don't forget attendance. Sarah asked if she could bring the baby. I was like, yeah, bring the intern. Yeah, too, because I think that's the intern.
This is my intern.
Absolutely.
He's not quite getting it yet.
She's going to be able to explain a CMA and an appraisal gap coverage and an escalation clause by the time he's 4.
It's first word with block off.
Because did you let them open them when they went with you? Yeah. A little bigger. Like, how did Andy learn how to add? How old was Andy when you got her? Was she an infant? 13 months. Okay. Oh. Yeah, she was 13 months and 13 pounds. So she was really tiny. And I remember coming back from China, well, I was in China, and somebody said, so what do you think she weighs? Because the information they gave us was all in, European measurements, and she was, according to their measurements, she could have been like 25 pounds. And when you looked at her, you're like, no way. Yeah. And I said, oh, I think she's about 15 pounds. And then I'm like, how do you know that? And she weighs the same as my bowling ball. And I brought her to the doctor 3 days after we landed in the States, and she weighed 15.5 pounds. And I know she gained weight after while we were in China because we actually fed her. Yeah. So yeah, cute little girl. Okay, she was 12:30. All right, so we're gonna start on time. So I want to set the stage here. So first of all, Brittany, thank you for coming. By the way, the dining room flowers are yours.
Oh,
yeah.
Sweet.
So we are selling a house today. We can't take you all out to a home. That would be a little cumbersome to take 1 million people or even 15 or 10 to a home for a real live listing consultation. However, you're going to see a live listing consultation. Brittany is going to convince me to sell my house. So she has the stats on my house. She's been to my house. She's actually done the walkthrough. So she knows what she's got, and she is here and prepared. So she's come into my house. We've done the nicety nice things. She did the walkabout in the consultation, right? Because that's the first thing that we do. And I'm going to now start. So Brittany, can I get you a glass of water?
Yes.
All right. Another refrigerator. Okay. Oh, that's what's in there.
Now they're at the dining table.
So now we're at the dining table. Okay, so here we go.
Margaret, I love your home. It's gorgeous. Yeah. So remind me again of all the updates that you've made.
Well, we bought it in 2020. And so the only thing we've done is we hated the carpeting upstairs. So we found the flooring that was on the main level and we just replaced that all the way through the house. So it's all hard surface all the way through.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So thank you so much for letting me come in. Sure. And all those good stuff. So let's get to it.
Okay.
So why are you selling?
It's time for a slower lifestyle. I'm retired and probably move back home.
In where's home?
Iowa.
Have you already started looking at homes in Iowa?
A little bit. I thought a little bit about having a home here and there because I have family in both places, but thinking it's probably time to just pull the trigger because Iowa did this really cool thing. They passed a new thing with their tax laws that retirement income is no longer taxed in the state of Iowa. So that suddenly made it very attractive to go. And that's
so with you moving to Iowa, do you have a time frame that you need to be there by?
In my perfect world, I really don't want, I'd like to be there probably September-ish, October, be there for the holidays.
Okay. And have you ever sold a home before?
Been a while.
Okay, perfect. So what would you say is your biggest factor with wanting to sell? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for the usability of selling? Are you looking for timing? If there's one thing that I can deliver to you and be completely accurate on, what is your motivation here?
All of those.
One thing.
One thing. Honestly, probably the money.
Money?
Yep.
Okay.
When you're retiring, money matters.
Okay. Perfect. Understand. So with that, do you have an idea what your numbers were?
Well, based on what I saw happening last summer, there's not been a lot of them selling here until recently, I guess. I'm thinking probably mid-5s.
Is that what your neighbors got, or?
Well, I saw some of them that sold for, I don't know, 525, 530, somewhere in there.
Okay.
You know, and you know, time is money, time, the appreciation, right? Market's going up, that's what they say. So I'm thinking, and I'm not right by the school, and I'm not right on Highway 72, so I'm tucked in here, so I don't get all that noise and all that crazy traffic in the morning.
Absolutely. So what was the biggest selling feature for you when you bought this and you built? Why'd you pick the lot that you picked?
Where it was,
Yeah.
Right, it's in the middle, right, but it's not, so it's in the middle of the complex, but yet the way they've got it set up, I can see, as you can tell, I can see some mountains over there, and I can see some foothills over there, and I miss all the traffic that goes on the end.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I have brought some comps with me so we can kind of go over pricing,
Okay.
and I can kind of show you what is selling, what isn't selling, and a little bit about the market. Before we get started on that, I kind of want to explain to you a little bit about the Denver metro market because it's been a while since you've seen it. Yes. So here in Colorado, we're a very seasonal market, and so what I mean by that is we kind of have highs and lows. Sometimes the market moves a little bit faster, sometimes it moves a little bit slower. So in our perfect world and kind of what has been happening over the last 3 years, we typically see an increase of activity in our market in the spring market. Sometimes it changes, believe it or not, the Broncos, actually, if they're in the playoffs, it stalls out our market a little bit. If they are not in the playoffs, then our market tends to pick up in that February timeframe, so a little bit prior to spring. So usually January is pretty slow, February starts to pick up, March gets pretty hot and heavy, and that continues through really July 4th. And then after July 4th, I see a huge dip in sales. Okay. So Labor Day, like Memorial Day, kind of also alters a little bit of it. So usually the first week before and the week after we kind of slow down. So I'm telling you all of this so that when we go to time listing, we know exactly what we're going to be listing. So Memorial Day tends to be a little bit slow. Fast forward after July 4th, we have another tip. So we have a lot of people that are done with their vacations. Most of those buyers are already settled because they want to be in for the school year. Okay. And then we start to see, depending on the year, depending on if it's an election year or not, things will either pick up or slow down from August to about December. Okay. Okay. One of our best months in real estate is always December. And partly because people pull their homes off the market in that October timeframe and they don't want it showing over that. So the reason I ask is what is your desired time frame is I need to know kind of what we're going to do or how we're going to maximize your money, how we're going to get you to where we need to be on time, and then have the convenience of selling as well. So based on what you're telling me, you're an ideal candidate to basically list in the spring. So what we're going to do with that, there might be a little bit of an inconvenience when it comes to selling the house as far as showing some traffic and all of that stuff. Okay, but it's our best opportunity to make you the most amount of money in the least amount of time. That's what I want to hear. Exactly. So with that being said, that's a general overview. Obviously, COVID kind of messed some things up for a little bit, and we had some time like in there to slow down, speed up, you know, do all of those things. But based on what you're saying, I would realistically like to get you on the market in the next couple of weeks. So okay. We see what we need to do. There's not a lot that you need to do to the house. The house looks great. Okay. So there's not a lot of prep work that will go into it. There is some staging and some photograph and all that. And I have a whole marketing plan that we'll go through. Okay. But in the meantime, as far as timing goes, that's what we're going to be. So the next obstacle for us is going to be pricing.
Okay.
And so with that being said, I have taken into consideration everything that has sold last year at this time and everything that has sold the last 6 months.
Okay.
And what you need to understand with pricing is, although an appraiser can go back a whole year with comparable properties, it's highly unlikely. And so what they'll do is they'll take into consideration the market, the time a year ago, and they can deduct and depreciate whatever the value is of that. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. It just depends on what current market conditions are. One of the things that we pride ourselves in is we study the current market conditions. And when I say current market conditions, day by day, week by week, we are in it, knowing exactly what's happening. We know the multiple offer situation. We know how many buyers actually viewed a specific property that went under contract. We know what the list price is going to be of the coming soon, and if they have prospects coming. So the reason I bring this up is because our last year sold, the January, February, March, we're in that mid-500 range. The last 6 and 7 months with the current market, they're not in the mid-500s price.
Eek. Well, where are they?
Roughly, where we're going to end up to be is probably a range of between like 5 and like 520 is what we're going to need to be.
Okay. So what if we, so right now there's nothing for sale.
Nothing for sale.
In the townhomes, right?
There's nothing for sale.
So what happens if we list it higher than what you say? And then, you know, if nothing happens in a couple of weeks, we can always come down, but I'd really like to get that 550 if we can. So what happened? What are your thoughts?
So do I have permission to share stories with you?
Not about me, that's fine.
Perfect. So what can $79,000 for you?
How much can what?
$79,000. How would you spend $79,000?
Sky's the limit.
Whatever you want to spend.
Well, for 79,000, I'm probably buying a new car.
Perfect. Great answer. One of the things that we learned this time last year, I was sitting with a seller directly across from me. I gave them a price of their home, told them that we would be priced at $700. They him and hawed for a little bit. We listed a month later as the market was starting to shift in May, same time frame. They insisted we list at $750. Insisted. I agreed to list at $750. The next comparable property next to us listed at $730. The next one listed at $715. The next one listed at $700. I have been saying $700 since March. Fast forward to July, we're at $700. Most of our comps now are selling in the exact $700, $690.
Okay.
October, I finally secured our first offer on this property at $675.
Oops.
Exactly. It did not close because my sellers were not willing to put on a new roof. They were willing to give the buyers a $2,500 credit for the deductible, but they were not willing to put on a new roof. Do you want to know what that property sold for in February?
Almost a year later?
Almost
sure.
$620.
Ouch.
$170,000 is what they missed out on because they were not committed to a price that made sense.
Okay.
I know I would have secured them $79,000 more at that time in that place if they just would have priced with me when I asked them to price with me at the correct price where the market was.
Okay.
Pricing too high is going to cost you money.
Okay.
And I can give you example after example after example. So what you need to understand is when you hire us, you're hiring our experience, you're hiring our years of doing this, you're hiring our marketing, you're hiring our connections, our network, our company, our office. We have a team of people that surround you in knowing that we are being priced aggressively in the market to net you the most amount of money in the least amount of time. Our listings on average, Heckenberg Group listings are selling 4% higher than the list price in a whole. It's actually 7% higher than what the average is of the competing realtors in our neighborhood. So I'm netting people 7% more than what they are doing. And part of it is because it's not because I'm underpricing. We don't underprice. We actually try to price to where we're at the very top of the market, because again, my biggest goal is to keep the most amount of money in your pocket. It's not to take money away from you.
Okay, but how do I know that we're not pricing it too low? How do I know that we're not giving it away, right? Because
understandable,
you know, like how do you know?
Understandable. So the reality is, I don't get control. You don't get control the market. None of us get control the market, right? Okay. And we've seen this, and part of it is too, with all of our comps back in January, February, and March. You remember that last year? Mm-hmm. Do you know where interest rates were at about that time?
A lot lower than they are today.
A lot lower than they are today. A lot lower than they are today. So interest rates were 3%, 3.25%, all of that. Buyers had full advantage of this. So what they were doing is they were essentially overpaying for the house because they had a really low interest rates. So that's why we have these inflated values last year that we're not necessarily seeing right now in this market. Okay. Do you know where rates are at now?
I have no idea.
They're in the high fives. Yeah, depending on what, between 5.5 to 6.5, depending on whatever it is.
Well, cheaper than 14% that I paid on my first house.
Absolutely. And I was paying 14%. And that was good, you know. And so it's one of these things that we have to take into consideration the market conditions around us. So while I appreciate, are we going to be priced too low? What I can tell you is there's a few factors leading up to it, right? And we'll know that pretty quickly. For every 6 showings, I should have 1 offer. That's how every one of our listings, have played out the last 2 years. Every 6 showings, 1 offer. Once I hit 6 showings and we have an offer, the goal is to have multiple offers. Okay. And the pricing strategy and the marketing strategy go hand in hand. We're not here to overprice it because it's so quick to overprice. It's going to add days on market. And the #1 factor taking money out of your pocket is days on market.
Okay, I can see that. All right.
So when we start to get longer on the market, then we need to have conversations about price reductions.
No, we don't do that.
We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can get you to Iowa in the time frame that you want with the most amount of money, because that's your biggest goal at the moment.
Okay. So you said again the range was what that you would list it at?
500 to 525. And okay. So one of the factors too with our comps. So a lot of the comparable properties that you had seen last year that were selling between that like 530 and 550, they were all the 3-bedroom. So there was a lot of 3 bedrooms. So that's where if you're seeing that price and you're seeing your neighbors, we have to understand that we need to compare apples to apples and price. Some of those were end units. And so there's a factor with that. Now, we might get really lucky. And what I will tell you that's happened to us in the last 3 weeks, because we statistically are seeing this shift right now currently in the market. Every listing that we have listed in the last 3 weeks, we have gotten multiple offers and we are hitting it 5% above what our list price is.
So that could get me back closer.
It could get you closer to 550.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the issue is we don't have to compete with 13, 20, 50, 60, or 180 days on market. So we want to keep buyers engaged and invested in your home in the least amount of time. I want the buyers that are ready, willing, and able and are ready to pull the trigger right away. Those are the ones that are willing to pay for your house. The buyers that are shopping in the market and looking at properties 15, 20, 21 days on market, those are not the buyers that we want.
Okay. All right. So what that marketing plan looks like?
It's the marketing plan. So we have a menu of items. And so we do 3 different types of packages for our sellers. Okay. And you're allowed to kind of pick what you want as far as that goes. When it comes to commission, and when it comes to marketing. Okay. So our first plan, we'll pull it up. Usually
who can ever rely on Wi-Fi and somebody else's house?
I normally do. So our first, I'll just go through it. So our first plan.
That's right, that's
Yeah, 5%, it basically is nothing on it. Okay. So there's like the MLS flyer. Okay.
Okay.
So our next one is 6%. We have a little bit more. So it's like house clean, I'll pull it in a second. Like house cleaning, Matterport, marketing, prospecting. Then our next one is 6.5%, and it's like the whole package. Area photos, videos, broker opens, open houses, clean in, clean out, moving boxes. It's a whole package. And so usually I'll like show this to them. Co-op is 2.5% on this. On the 5%, it's not really a package I ever recommend. Partly is if we start to ever see an increase in inventory, what agents do, and I don't condone it, but what agents will do is they'll look at what they're getting paid and they're going to weed yours out right away. So we want to be able to be competitive with our co-op fee. And 2.8% gets us into these two packages. With this, we're doubling our marketing and our exposure. With our sellers that are doing this package, they're on average between 6 and 8% of our list price. So when people say, oh, does staging really work? Oh, does cleaning the house really work? Oh, does minor repairs really work? It's benefiting our sellers and more dollars in the okay. So that's this package, that's this package. What are you more comfortable with?
Well, I like the 5, because that puts more money in it.
It actually does not put any more money in your pocket.
I figure
you're talking 1%, but if over here I'm getting seller for 8% more, and you're only paying 1% more, I'm actually netting you closer to $30,000 more on this than I could do this.
Oh, $30,000, that's a lot of money. Okay, so this one is 6. Okay, so wait a minute. So it's a co-op thing. This is 2.8 and then 2.5.
Yeah.
The buyers don't pay their own agents?
They do not pay their own agent.
Well, that's silly.
It's silly, but it's just the way of the game. It's the way the game goes. Do you remember when you bought, did you pay your buyer's agent?
I don't know. Probably not.
Probably not.
No. There was all kinds of fees. I just wanted to
right. A lot of fees. And you know, the reality is, to be totally honest, we want to work with agents. We want to work with an agent on the other end.
Okay.
So we want to work with someone that's competent to know what's going on and be an advocate. Because the goal is, I want you to have a happy transaction and I want them to have a happy transaction. Because when we have a happy buyer and we have a happy seller, everybody's happy. And it's my job to be the intermediate between us agents. So I won't come to you with problems. I'm just going to handle everything. They're not going to go to their buyer. They're going to handle everything. We want to co-op with professionals. And if we have professionals that are continuously discounting their services, it makes for a rocky transaction.
Okay. Okay, so another question. So, okay, so this one's 5. So, okay, we'll take that one out. So we have 6 and 6.5. Okay, so we went with the 6 because I don't need aerial in a townhome, right? If we went with 6,
oh,
so
yeah,
you've got, okay.
Not to interrupt you, but let me ask you this. So you just said you don't need aerial in a townhome. What did you tell me was one of the factors that you picked your lot?
Oops. Because it was in the middle of the complex and I think there's a lot of traffic in the school kids.
So don't you think buyers are going to have the same feeling?
You're really good at this. Okay, so regardless of which one of these we picked, okay, one of the things that attracted me to the Heckenberg group was that you guys talk about you have a lot of buyers. Yeah. So if you have a buyer who's looking for my home, does this go down at all?
It does not go down.
Okay.
It doesn't go down. So we're still doing the same amount of work. We're doing the same amount of work. Both our buyer and both you, our seller, are going to have exceptional service for us. You're here to ensure every aspect of the transaction is being nailed in and dialed in with no problems for you. So no, the commission does not go down if I bring in.
Okay.
The only reality is, and I like control. So one of the factors too that most people don't understand, it doesn't matter if I have an outside buyer or my buyer. When we go, remember, we're pricing at the very top of where my comps are. We're right there. So I can have one appraiser pull an old, maybe outdated comp, maybe something that doesn't make sense. So what we're doing is we're making sure that when we meet with the appraiser, which we meet with the appraiser, we are handing him essentially, or her, all the comps, all of your updates and all of your upgrades. We are explaining to him why you picked the lot that you picked and why your lot is better than the one that's over there. So guess what? On my comps, I'm discounting all of the comparable properties that are backing to Highway 93 or 72, backing to 72. So they already know where our mindset is and what number and what value I want. That service is going to happen regardless if it's my buyer or somebody else's buyer. Okay. Because again, at the end, I want to make sure that our buyer knows that they're not being ripped off on a price, and I want to secure the highest amount for you as well. Okay. Nobody feels good when their house doesn't agree. No, it doesn't. And so the same amount of effort throughout the entire transaction is still there regardless.
Okay. All right, so one more question.
Absolutely.
So if you bring your buyer,
yep.
Okay, how do you avoid, well, how do I make sure you're representing me and not fighting for them?
It depends on the agency agreement that we're in, right? So, and I guess better question for you is, when you say me bring a buyer, are you speaking to like somebody walking into an open house where I have no representation, or are you talking about someone that I'm in an active buyer agency agreement with? Do you know the difference?
I don't.
Okay, no, know the difference, right? Most people don't know the difference. So let me explain to you the differences in agency here in Colorado. Okay, so we have what we call a transaction broker. So our transaction broker, I like to think of as the referee. The referee. So they basically take guidance from either the seller or they take guidance from the buyer, okay? Depending on what agency we're in. We have seller's agent. Seller's agent exclusively works with sellers. So they are advocating for their seller. They are able to do opinions. They're able to be basically an entire coach. We have the same idea on the buyer side, right? Okay. So buyer side also has their coach. So TB, referee, buyer seller agents act as a coach. And then we have what we call as a customer, okay? Customer is probably not something that you ever want to be treated at in Colorado. Customer, you have no representation. I have to treat you fair. So if I'm working with you, because my listing agreement, I'm your exclusive seller, right? I'm your exclusive seller. I get to advocate. I get to tempt the appraiser with Girl Scout cookies and comparable property, right? I get to do all of that on my end to secure your price. Customer, I'm hands off. So the reality is, even though if I do have a buyer, especially a lot of my marketing efforts should generate a customer. Okay. So they should generate a customer. I still have to treat them fair. I still have to treat them ethically, but I'm not doing anything to go above and beyond.
So you're still working for me.
I'm always working for you.
Okay.
Always working for you.
Okay.
And the reality is, if we ever get into a situation where I feel I am in a buyer agency agreement and a seller agency agreement, and I can't do my job effectively, I will tell you.
Okay. That sounds fair. Okay. All right, how are we marketing this thing?
Well, I would like to start photos next week. So I'm going to send you an entire time frame. So this is how our process works. So what I traditionally like to do, I like to photograph either like a Monday, Tuesday, and we'll kind of build our time frame out, right? So right now, Jeffco Public Schools goes on spring break next week. So I don't want to do anything next week as far as that goes. I'd like to photograph the 28th. So I can get my photographer in there the 28th. If that's too much time, you can push it back another week. I want to be on market before the middle of May, period. So that gives you some time if you need to do anything that you want to do, but I don't want to go to market anytime later than you need it. So with that being said, this is your timeline. Timeline is I'm able to photograph on the 27th, 28th, either. Get photographer in, we'll have a turnaround. We're going to be in a coming soon status for a full 7 days. Coming soon status actually gives me a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to pricing. And what I mean by that is I can adjust the price based on activity and how I feel market is going, and it's not going to negatively affect you. So when you're telling me, what if we miss the mark on pricing and what if we price too low? If I'm not getting a lot of activity or inquiries or any of that in my coming soon status, I can adjust the price based on our conversation. And once it hits the market, then that gets a little weird about changing anything to do with pricing, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because it's going to stick to the property. If I go into the listing history, you can actually see the price changes in a coming soon status.
So if we priced it too high, we would know. We can adjust it, and nobody would know we made that adjustment. Did that go the other way too? If that we start here, look too low, and we realize, oh, there's enough activity.
Absolutely, move it up. Yeah. A lot of it is going to be based on my showing activity, because we'll be able to schedule showings while they're coming to status. The phone calls I get from agents, the phone calls I get from my blast of our a little internal community. So we have active buyers that are searching for specific properties. So everything will be email blast to them as well. So I can gauge that. I can gauge the traffic of our map report and our website to kind of see all that. And so it's all just depends on where we're at. Most of the time I don't ever actually adjust price because I'm usually right on with where we need to be.
Okay.
I can be wrong sometimes.
That's always been
but I don't plan on it for you. I don't plan on it for you.
Okay. So what do you think, guys? Should I give her the job?
But as long as it's not a real job, because all these specifics are making me nervous. Yeah, so that's my recap.
Okay. I think we're done. We hired her. Okay. So I wasn't too mean to you. I was like, oh, you were great. Okay, you're great. So I tried to get in all of the major objections. Okay, so I don't like this. I don't like my back to be learned. So now, so that was 3 minutes. Okay, that pretty much
In and out.
in and out. She was quick.
Right. Brittany, were there any areas that Margaret didn't push back on that you often get pushback from?
Not really. I think, commission is always kind of a pushback. We found when we started doing like the menu type stuff, we found that to really eliminate a lot of pushback on
People can see.
because then they can actually see, and it's actually like decent. I'm sorry, I couldn't pull it up because it sounded like really crappy, but it's not. There's a lot of, and there's like things too. There's things in there that doesn't necessarily cost you money, right? Like one of the things like prospect marketing, right? So it doesn't necessarily cost you money, but it costs you time, like to make phone calls and pick up the phone and do all of those things. And so the difference between like 6 and 6.5 for us is a lot of that 0.5% is actual money that we fork out, right? So it's the staging, it's the food for the broker open, it's the aerial, it's like all of this stuff that really starts to add up, but it does make a difference in the end for the sellers. And so I'm willing to do all of that if they're committed to paying the higher price, right? And I could definitely have sellers be like, I like this for this. And we're like, well, then we're also taking this, and this, and this off. Like, so we don't budge too much when it comes to that stuff. Is there like give and takes, of course. But I think it's also important to know, your seller's motivation, and so sometimes we'll get heavy pushback on price. And at that point, I shift the conversation to say, okay, I know that the price is where it is. So now at this point, I've learned from the one that was $79,000. So now all of my listing agreements, I have a termination fee in there of $2,500. So if you want to terminate with me, early termination, I need to recoup my money. And I built in there when we are actually doing price drops. So on a week by week, I am tracking inventory, and my sellers get a spreadsheet from us, and it's basically what went under contract, what pended. If the agent is willing to disclose that price, it's on there. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And so you can see, so week by week, my sellers are knowing what is happening in the market so that we can quickly adjust. And it kind of gives us analysis of all the marketing stuff. This is where we're at, this is showing, this is our feedback, this is good, this is bad. And even though we get feedback, sometimes we still get the phone calls to say, hey, thanks so much for getting your feedback. I don't know all that, like, what do you really think? Like, if I know, like, there's gonna be cat smell, but nobody's willing to put it in feedback. Yeah. As they don't. Like, agents are really hard about putting anything negative in feedback. And I will say this. As a buyer's agent, if you are competing on a property, don't ever put anything negative in feedback. Always sell the house. If your buyer has no interest in the house, be brutally honest, okay? But if you're the buyer's agent, don't be brutally honest if you want your buyers to go to the property. Because I actually look at that stuff. And then I'm like, well, what pain in the ass buyer that is, but then they're the ones that are submitting, submitting the offer. So like I pay attention to this. So when we have 2 or 3 or 4 offers and I'm going over feedback and I have a buyer that's like nitpicky and this and that, but I have an option from them, it kind of sets the tone for what it is. Especially when it's hard to make a decision, right? Like when you all are putting down similar money down, and they all have relatively the same price, same closing date, right? Good to know. And I can share that information with my seller because again, I'm their advocate, right? So just that, so there's different things with that as far as pushback goes. I think pushback I get recently is if I ask them to make repairs and they don't want to pay them. And so that's kind of been something like really heavy. And so I have to draw them back into like one of my sellers. She doesn't want to paint. Well, she doesn't want to paint. She doesn't want to take the TV down to paint. Okay, so there's a huge old TV on the wall, and she's having painters come in, and I said, remove the damn TV to paint because the TV is going with them, right? And so it's just going to look bad, and then she's going to have to do it at some point anyways, but she doesn't want to do it now. And so I'm like, look, when a buyer goes up to the top and they're looking at the loft and they see behind that you didn't take the time to remove the TV to hang it, it puts some doubt in there, and we're going to be at the top of the pricing, like. We're not like low, where buyers are going to overlook this. We're trying to secure the highest price in that entire neighborhood, which we will. But I'm just saying, the only way we can do that is by improving condition. And so that's been a lot of pushback for most of my sellers is, I know that door is like chipped and broken and ugly and you like stuff with white out, you're going to have to replace the door or sand it and paint it. Which is silly, and I know it's not the best, but again, we're in this weird kind of intermediate market where like we kind of have the really desperate buyers that we're in a security thing, but then we have like buyers that are kind of looking for here and super picky. So it's like this like kind of balancing act of like, who do we have? Like there was a day where you could probably have like a pile of dog crap on the floor and still get 15,000 quickly, right? And that's like gone. So those things are gone. So I feel condition is just as important as pricing. With Margaret's house, condition is not an issue. It's not even an issue. So I don't have to necessarily have the condition talk with her, but I would say probably half of my sellers I have to have the condition talk.
You'd have to talk to me about the door of the garage that the dogs.
And that's I would assume telling stories about today's market, because you can absolutely not touch the door or not touch the television, but then that price that you want to get becomes increasingly difficult to reach. And buyers
on market, and that's the biggest thing. The longer we sit on the market, the more money comes out of the seller's pocket.
Right.
And I would rather, and this is me personally, I would rather push off listings for a solid year. The sellers can make these minor little repairs as opposed to rushing coming to market Because at the end of the day, it's just gonna take money out of their pocket, you know? And you're talking like, I just had my auxiliary place going, which is not very happy. But I'm like, I would work for $300, but the door looks like it's like been dogs chewed through it. It doesn't look good. And everything else about the house looks good. She's like, well, it's gonna take me a week. I'm like, great, that's totally fine. I don't have like 15 houses I'm competing with at the moment. I think great, and I can handle that. Right? And so I'm not going to get 15 houses to come on the market in the next 2 weeks. So I think taking your time to improve condition pays off. Now I don't want someone doing a full on remodel unit because I don't know what's going to happen in 7 or 8 months. So that's different. But does that answer some of the questions? Okay.
So comment on the feedback. So one of the things that I always try and do as a buyer's agent is I never know who's getting the feedback first. Because there are agents out there who let it go directly to the seller. So when I never do that, don't be that. Don't be that listing agent. However, as a buyer's agent, think that the person getting it very likely may be the seller. And so I always do mine. I start with a thanks for letting us view your property, right?
Yes.
And then it goes back to my HR days when we used to do reviews. You give them something positive, you give them something to work on, and then you finish it, right? And so I do try and find something to compliment that seller, because here's the deal. If the agent is garbage, if you've given good feedback, they might remember you, always. And when they get that expired listing and they still want to sell it, who might they still call? So I think that as a marketing thing, I'm not afraid to admit to them and say, my seller really thought the door between the garage and the kitchen should have been updated because your dog's in scratching. Right? That's reality. That is true in my house. Okay. And so they know that, right? They know that the cat could pee in the basement or whatever the scenario is, right? So be honest, but be careful how rude you get. Right? Don't be nasty about it. Like, house was a piece of crap. It showed that that's for the voice part with Brittany, right? But always think that you're advertising to that seller. And then what was the other thing you were talking about? Is condition, right? The thing that I would tell the seller is that if they look behind the TV and you haven't painted it, my very first question as a buyer is what shortcuts have you offered? What else have you not taken sure so I
Right. Start noticing that too.
Well, that's the thing, like one little thing is just like kind of trickled down. See, they're not doing it themselves, right? So it's not that big of a deal, right? So it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, just take care of it. Or if you're not, then at least allow me to have that conversation. So when I have a fight in the house that says, TV's kind of a beast, but it will be painted once it's removed, right? So that buyers don't have that objection locking in, you know? So again, I think at the end of the day, it's always about communication. Like we will send out sometimes they used to fill out select property disclosure. I'm going to time to figure it out. So I like to think that I'm reviewing the select property disclosure before we go to market. That doesn't always happen. But one of the things we do send out is like the frequently asked questions, right? That you get from buyer's agents, because I want to know that. And one of the questions it's like simple stuff like, burn a top out of your roof, like sewer line, because you're always going to get asked that. But the other thing is, like, what made you buy this home? What do you want in my marketing for me to really highlight? This is stupid stuff, like a lazy Susan. Okay, I would have never mentioned the lazy Susan in the Susan. But yeah, so I'm like, okay, so it just depends, right? So I think knowing what they want so that you don't have these weird conversations when it's been on the market 7 or 8 days and they're like, well, you didn't listen there, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, right? Like we're trying to avoid all of that and highlight the house to where they feel really good about everything, you know?
So did you guys notice when I pushed back on the marketing at 6.5, what she did to me?
Oh yeah.
What she did?
Ninja. She reminded you of why you bought the property and how aerial photography would show that off.
Right? So what was she doing? Listening. We're just listening. I mean, just sitting there. I mean, yes, we were kind of playing, but the reality was it was truly my house and I was telling you stories. And the fact that she remembered that, I was like, Like, right? That's what you gotta do when you're out there, because you gotta pull them back to, like, it was getting hard to like cover why I didn't want to pay her 6.5%. Like, I was like, yeah, whatever, I mean, can I come up with, like, my wheels were turning because I wanted to give some more, and I was
the reality is, regardless of whatever y'all charge, right? Because we don't really have commissions. Whatever y'all charge is like, you have to be confident in the value that you provide clients at the end of the day. I mean, my next door neighbor, they should be selling in like 2-3 days. They hired the 1995 company. This is a $1.46 million house. And they hired the guys to sell their home for 1995. Why is that? Because did they not find anybody that they found value in? We just go score, by the way. Because this might be a good, like, for, you know, yeah, it is under contract. And so
it's so itself, basically, right?
It's a great house. It's a great house. But no, but my point is, like, clearly, like, people are willing to always go the cheap route, you know? And so you just have to be able to differentiate yourself from it. What I can tell you, and this is swear to God true, I just closed with these same guys last week, and I was on the buy side, and they didn't do what they said they were going to do in the resolution. And so I sent him, I'm like, what about this? What's about this? I don't want this to happen. And he screenshotted back to me in a text a resolution from a different property.
Oops, there's a lot, it doesn't matter how much state charts, there's a lot of crappy.
And so, I mean, just was like, well, first, wrong property. So why don't you pull a resolution for this one? But it's like that type of stuff, you know, and he misrepresented the listing, and I got my buyer's $2,500 more because he couldn't put in the right freaking correct fees. Like, it cost the seller. And the beautiful thing about it is my amendment sent to them said, because you misrepresented the HOA fees, my buyer's seeking $2,500 for compensation. So that's a good conversation to have.
1995 isn't looking so.
That's what I mean. And so I'm just saying, like, sometimes you get what you pay for. I'm praying to God and those are one free. But you know, it's just one of those things where you're just like, you have to be of value too, right? To your sellers, right? So you have to be able to prove to them why you're worth it. And that's the bigger thing.
So let's go back in role play.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brittany, okay, so I'm good with the commission. Let's go 6.5. You sold me on the aerial. I'm starting to get a little nervous about the timing. So I said I wanted to move in September. Yeah. Today's March 15th, 14th, whatever it is. If we go to the market at the end of the month, and with your marketing, we end up closing by May 1st. Yeah. I'm not ready to go. Like, this feels a little, this makes me a little nervous because I'm not ready yet.
So my crystal ball is broken at the moment. What I'm telling you is what's happening in the market right now. Okay. Your September time frame is going to take money out of your pocket. And that's happened year over year over year. If I were able to net you $15,000 more in May versus September, would you move?
Probably, maybe. 30,000? Well, yeah, 30,000. Yeah, I guess there's an Airbnb back there. So, but can I like sell it and then rent it from the new people?
We can do a variety of things. So this is what I call like the buffet. Okay. So the buffet looks something like this. I will have sellers say, I want to stay in my house for 60 days and I want the highest price in the house. And I want no showings whatsoever. And I just want people in my house for 2 hours and free for all. Doesn't always work that way, right? So what we have to do is we have to leverage some of this. So if price is the most important thing for you, okay, there's a possibility that that buyer that's going to come in is not going to let you stay in that house for 60 days. So there's a give and take. There's a give and take as far as that goes. And typically with pricing and post-occupancy agreements and the amount of showings and the timing, there has to be a pyramid that we're building to. Again, if it's price, I need to know if I'm to secure a price for you that's 20, 15, 20, or 30,000 over lift, can you get your stuff out in 3.5 weeks?
You know, yeah, I guess I could hire somebody for that kind of money.
Most of us could, and if not, I have a really company that can. The reality is interest rates are doing this boom, 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 boom. You're in a wonderful position right now where rates have just come back down. So what typically happens is that every time we see some volatility in the market, which is true, every time we see some volatility in the market with interest rates, it stalls our market out for a couple weeks. And this is stuff that we've been tracking for the past couple of years. And what I mean by that is now that we've had interest rates kind of come down, buyers are going, where are they going to come down more? And so they're pausing some of their search. So we can time it that last week of March, because rates dropped this week, then buyers are going to be back in full force in March. And they're probably be willing to spend a little bit more money because guess what? 30 days ago, your house that was valued at $515, they were basically able to buy it at $500 because of the rate, right? Okay. Now we're at $515, they might be able to come up to $520, $521, $525 because of the interest rate has been so significant to them. What I can't control is I have no clue what interest rates are going to do in August. Right. None. And so the reality with that is I can say, no problem, why don't you wait? But there's a couple factors that push that time frame out. So with our marketing, our goal is to get our contract no less than 2 weeks. So if you're really vested in moving in September, you probably need to be on the market at the end of July. July, everything kind of stalled out again. So it's not the best time to sell. Then we have back to school. Things stall out with back to school. So again, our time frame, what's happening with that specific time frame is it's taking money out of your pocket. We're losing buyers.
Okay. Awesome. I have a question about price drops. You said that you schedule those into your contract.
Yeah.
And I'd just love to hear your opinion, but also other experienced folks. Nobody wants to do one, but what's your strategy with them?
I think the reality is they kind of know, right? So if it's in the listing agreement and I'm like, by this day, but like you guys know, like you know what the market's doing, right? You know what the market's doing when you go into a listing, right? So just like Margaret said, and to be honest with you, I normally don't really price the house until I go out to the MLS. And so, yeah, like one of my listing agreements, like last week, I'm in this week, and I'm coming to market $15,000 than what I totally would last week. And partly it's because I have no inventory now. So 2 weeks ago, when we were looking at all of this, I had a lot more actors to choose from. They're gone. And so I don't get super specific about it with that. And I know it's going to sell, so it's different. So the conversation with like the price drops and all of that stuff is, you know, when you go into there where the price needs to be. The reality is you're going to get pushback from your sellers of like, well, my house is when my house is done. So what that looks like is, let's just for easy numbers. So if you're telling them that the house is worth 500 and they're saying, well, it's at least 525. So I like bracket pricing. So I like the $25,000, right? So like 525, 556. It's just clean to me. But with that being said, so if we get to 525, I'm like, we'll try your price out for no more than 9 days. And then that's when you kind of manipulate the data. Because if you have something that's like actually priced really well, it is seriously selling in 4 days. So 9 days is actually 2 day long to be making any adjustments. But so you have in your listing agreement, agree to this price. If by this specific date, the home is not under contract, seller agrees to reduce the price of this. And so then it makes that a really easy conversation to have with them saying, maybe try it out. I got nothing. And you don't have anything, you know, if you're actively negotiating, again, because my goal is I really truly want to know my farmers, right? So if I'm kind of actively, or I have somebody circling around or that, then I'm not one to basically drop that agreed price. I might instead call that agent that's circling around and say, hey, I think we might be doing like a 5,000, 10,000 to see if I can get that higher before I commit to that 25,000 restriction. So again, it just kind of depends on how you want to play it. And then you're someone for sure, you can figure it out before they drop 25,000 and just that. But it's just all kind of like a game. Yeah.
Margaret and Stacy and Rhea, I mean, anybody who has experience with this, I'd love to hear your approach to the price drops, which we've seen price improvements that we've seen in the last few months.
Yeah. I mean, we've both been in the business. We both got our license in 2014. I mean, how often have you had to do a price reduction since then? Like, not much. A couple, but not often, honestly. It's been a seller's market for. I mean, however, if I go back to the brakes, that's right. They definitely pushed us on the price. We actually listed that on the board of partners, and they pushed it, and we absolutely put it into the contract that said they had to do it because I knew they were pushing me on the price range, right? Like if I would have continued to push Brittany to go to 550, I would have expected her to say, okay, I'll play it, but in 10 days we're going to 5.25, right? I would put it in the listing contract. If they take my pricing or they're close enough to my pricing, I may not put it in the contract. However, sometimes we miss, right? And you did a great job setting that expectation right from the very thing, going, this is where I think it is. I'm not always perfect, but I'm usually there, right? And so then I go in armed with data. And I'll go, this is what we looked at when we set the price at 521. Here's, since we've been on the market, and I did this with you the other day, here's the comps, here's what was on the market when we hit the market. They're all still sitting. Here's what's come on the market since we did, and they've all gone into contract. So you start to see where your competition is as you're playing this game. And then I have the conversation and say, look, these move because of price. Right? It depends on where they started from.
Right. Good.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is, and I really do reach out to the agents whose properties that go to their contract. And I kind of know, right? Like if I'm in a position to be able to preview something before, you know, like if it's been on the market, I'll go preview my competition, which is a trick I learned like 20 years ago because nobody has to do that anymore. But you might, I mean, with the market shift, you might have to start previewing your competition, right? And so with that being said, you know right away, and like Stonebriar is a perfect example. Like seriously, you guys would have just went with my price. I am 100% confident they would have $80,000 more to pay. Like 100%. And it was one of the things, week by week by week, I kept saying, hey, we're missing it, we're missing it, we're missing it, we're missing it. We're going to get to a point where even 650 is not even reachable for us. And it just didn't happen. And so you can see that being a professional of what is actually going on in the market to where you can quickly shift and adjust. Because the reality is the majority of the agents around us don't work that hard. So they're the ones that are messing it up for us. So that's pretty damn easy if we just voted our buyers to it, you know, and we know, and then you're the expert, you know, but I like those overpriced listings that I'm, you know, sitting with. And I like the fact that the agent doesn't know what that property is selling for down the street. I'm like, you know, and it's relatively easy.
One of the things I do is that when I'm even in the inkling stages, like I have one the other day that's out Green Valley Ranch, my least favorite place to sell it, that's okay. I will put a spreadsheet. So many different, so there you go, watching out, out there. You get affordable housing, expensive transfer fees, don't look at that. However, I have now a search in the MLS for a half a mile around the property address, and when something new comes on the market, doing Google Reach to go out and see that house. I take a printed copy of the MLS and I write notes about the house. And I just tuck it away. Okay, because then when we finally go on the market, because we will someday, I can go out there with the information to why I saw this house, and I saw this, and I saw this, and that helps me with that seller. And do you know how else it helps me with?
Yeah. See that for them. It's for the condition for.
I have a listing lots of good stuff. House across the street. The price and the way it looked in the MLS didn't line up.
Agreed.
So I went and I had previewed
it.
And I have discovered that they did not replace the cabinets. That all they did was they did a really good paint job on them and put some hooks on it.
Yeah.
And the countertop was not stone like it looked. They had painted the stuff to make it look like it was granite. No appraiser would have known that.
Agreed.
But I had it written down. So when I met to my appraiser package, he said, oh, by the way, that house across the street, that kitchen looks like it's fully remodeled, but I was in it. And when you can say, I was in it, that gives you credibility with those appraisers. And so that is one of my tricks that I preview every home around my listing, even if I might not get it for 2 years. Right? I keep an eye on it.
At least keep an eye on it. I was going to ask you, maybe, so you didn't have it here. You said, normally you would have the menu services to share with them, right?
Yes.
What else do you bring to the table when you go to your?
Definitely. I mean, so I'll have like comps. Like I like that quick CMA stuff. So that's usually on there. It's all in my head now because I looked through it this morning, but usually have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Because I can show Margaret. I'm like, yeah, see these are 525. These were the 3-bedrooms, right?
Right.
These ones that just sold at 489, those were the 2-bedrooms.
Right.
So it's easier to have a visual. I love visuals.
Yes.
And so they get a heads up on my pre-listing, so I'll email a pre-listing package.
Okay.
And it's in there, like the 5, the 6, the 6.5.
Okay.
And so it kind of cuts the tension, like when people are how much, because they kind of know what it is, right?
Yeah.
So they already know what it is.
Gotcha.
And so I love the pre-listing stuff with that. So their emails. Back in the day, I would like drive it to their house. We don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just email everything.
So would you be willing, you do not have to say yes, would you be willing to share that menu service with those of us that are in here?
Yeah, for sure.
If we could email it and then Stacy will make sure that you're here.
Yeah.
If you're here for the benefits, guess what's coming to you? Anybody want to use menu service?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm
That's good to know, right? So when you talk about your pre-listing packet, so you send it out digitally with your menu services. What's your pre-listing packet look like? What does that mean? Because one of the things that we hear at Ignite is, here's your listing presentation, and you create it out of command. You notice she didn't have one, right? And she didn't even reference that I normally bring it. She didn't talk about that, right? She's got a pre-listing packet, but we teach you about these listing presentations that are sitting in command of me. What's yours? Like, how did you get it? What does it contain? High level.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's like a couple different things. One of the things is I actually don't enjoy talking about myself at all because I am a high D. And so I don't really care if people like know anything about me. Like a lot of people don't know that we have 4 children because it's not ever about me, right? Like I'm in there to do one job. So our pre-listing talks a lot about us, like who we are, what our values are, our years of experience. And one of the pamphlets in there is questions to ask the realtor, and then I answer it, right? Like how long have you been in business? How many homes have you sold? You know, what are the areas that you work? How is this full time? Is this part time? So like that's all that stuff like established ahead of time. So I don't have to go in, and that's the thing. Like my listing presentations are not. I mean, I would lose my mind if I go about 45 minutes because I don't want to be in there, right? So the pre-listing package is a lot about us and who we are, what we do, what our values are, how many homes we sold, like all of that stuff. So that just kind of gets out of the way. So I figure If I have a seller that cares about that, they probably already read it. And if I have a seller that doesn't care about it, they're either going to ask me about it when I'm sitting in front of them, but it does me no good to talk to them about all the really great things we've done. Somebody cares. They just want money, right? They just want to know you're going to do a good job, they can trust you, and then you're going to net them money, right? So I don't have to spend 30 minutes talking about myself.
Well, and you had 2 high D's sitting at the table,
right?
So we just went straight to the chase. So the high D's, that's the disc. We don't have to work. We don't much of that. I'm not. Disc. Yeah. And we're actually going to bring in no, disc is not detailed. A D stands for a driver, somebody who's very quick, right? And so that's a D, and I is very much about wanting to be your best friend. They're very relational, right? I'm a very high D, high I.
So much, that's
right. I bounce between the two, and it changes back and forth depending on the day I take the test. Right. This one is the farthest thing from the D, right? You're a C, right?
Oh, you're a high S.
High SC, right? Not really. It's needs adaptive. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And S stands for
Oh, is this the DI
situation?
Like, I think of it as support. Like, you really care, you really want to support people, you're like really like you want everybody to win, you're just scary. Yeah, we can't win. And then the C is detail oriented. Those are the engineers and the account CPAs. Then we want to guess what kind of what's right? So, but with a lot of D in there too. Yes, but I tell the story all the time. Stacy and I can both tell you the same story. It'll take me 1 minute, take her 5. Right? Because she's going to make sure you know the details, you have all of the backgrounds and everything. And was it a red shirt? And I'm like, there's right? And so recognizing what that other person is, and we're bringing the skills lab in June, where we're going to dive deep into that to teach you when you're sitting in front of somebody, you know who you're working with, right? Immediately, right? And you probably have picked it up on the phone or any other conversations. But if you're working with somebody like Brittany and I who are high Ds, and we're under any kind of stress at all, I don't have time for your story. Like, what do you want? Let's go wrap it up. Come on.
But if I know, so James, and that's the thing. So I learned on DISC, and I'm happy to teach DISC. I love it. But anyways, on that, like, you have to also know who you're like sitting across, right? Because if you are like, you have to know who you are, but then you also have to know who you are. Because if you're with Heidi, they could care less about your entire life story. So you just keep your mouth shut and you just give them what they want to hear, right? And even like one of my closings today, they're both in sales. They were so funny. Like, I could tell they were getting irritated. So he was like going through their note. And I know them very well. And I just said, you know, Dawn, just close her. Do you guys really want her to go through everything on the note? And they're like, no. And I'm like, they just want to say. I go, they actually have to be somewhere around 15. Like, I'm like, they have to meet the correct people at 15. I mean, they're very good at their jobs. They're very high sales. And so I was talking to them about this, and I said to them, like, I am not detail oriented. And they're like, really? That really surprises me. And I'm like, yeah, because I can be the chameleon and know who I'm working with, right? Like, I know these two were very high eyes, and what they appreciate is details. So I over communicate. I don't want to, like, because that's not my personality, but I over communicate with the two of them multiple times a day because they don't read text or emails. So then I call. But it's just one of those pieces where it's like, you have to know who you're working with so you can basically tailor your listing presentation to them, right? Like, if you have somebody that's like high and just loves you so much, then plan on being there for an hour and 15 minutes. And make sure you get the names of their children, the names of their pets, like their favorite, like all that stuff. So it just depends. So you kind of know getting into it. You should spend time with them on the phone.
Well, and to use us, right? That's a really easy example. Is that I have to recognize, being a high D, that Stacy needs to be able to tell me those stories. right? And she needs to recognize on the same time that in certain circumstances, she's not in the mood and I just need to cut this short, right?
And sometimes I would say, Margaret, I just need you to sign this here.
Knowing that about your potential clients, the people that you meet on the street, and you being able to be the chameleon and adapt to what they need, because here's the deal, they ain't adapting to you.
No, right.
Right?
So it's listening and mirroring.
Yeah.
Right.
And I used to ask my boss. Yeah.
It's coming to do.
So one of the things too, so like with our free listing package, it kind of hits everybody, right? So it'll hit all the ISC, right? So it'll talk about like the difference between like the photography, right? You know, so I have examples of like the high, like the crappy ones and then the nice ones, right? So like our marketing stuff in there. And so there's marketing pieces for that. There's client testimonials, right? So for people that want like the support, you know, so my F's love that, right? My D's are like, how many homes did you sell? What was this? It's like, it kind of goes through like our average price, all that stuff. So the pre-listing is just all of that stuff. So I would have to touch on every single thing in the listing presentation.
I have a question.
But I don't provide any costs and I don't provide any pricing. I never do that.
Right. That's
Ever.
in a pre-list.
I've never, ever. Yeah.
So some of us, I don't know if it would be to my advantage to say, oh, well, I've sold 6 homes. Are they gonna go?
I don't think that I think when I was in York, I pulled the office stuff. I used everything in the office.
Yeah.
So I would say our brokerage, this is where we're at.
And now I finally got testimony, now I've got some reviews, I only
Yeah.
have 3, but I at least can put them in there, and if I have 2 houses,
I have 2 in there. So it doesn't matter.
yeah.
Yeah.
And because you're part of the coaching team, right? You can also say our team, right? Because you are part of our team. Our team sells over 125 homes a year, which is a very true statement.
Yeah.
I was just gonna have like private coaching in a way as well.
Yeah.
It's like I
like that's well, yeah. Charles put out 2 really interesting statistics. KW is involved in 1 in 5 sales in the country, and then they never sell customer data, client data. The database stays. So I thought that those were the things.
That's great. I would absolutely follow. I mean, I would put all of that, and especially if you don't have the staff that you feel that you would need, which I don't think. It's just, I think you just go to what you're comfortable with, and then it starts to build up. Yeah. But I can tell you all the time, I'll be like, I put in the national stats, then I put in the office stats, then I would, you know, do all that stuff, and you just are confident with what you have, you know.
And I want to add, it definitely helps to include it in the pre-listing packet by taking the sort of offensive stance versus defensive. So they already see it. And then, like you mentioned, you can focus solely on them in the in-person meeting. And when I've done that in the past, they never ask me any sort of questions about me.
Yeah, I'm right there and say, so how many homes have you sold? And I'm gonna go, that's a lot, 6.
Yeah.
My team.
But see, I haven't used that. I mean, use that word.
That's really
Not that's
I mean, I think it's also really important, and I know some of you heard this from me, right, is to tell your story.
Yeah.
Right. And when I came into the business, right, I came from a business background. It's all high degree of confidence. I very rarely ever heard, so how long have you been in business? Right. But when I did get asked, I had a story to tell. I had to have my elevator pitch. So my elevator pitch was always chocolate. And I thought, well, I think my entire life has brought me here, but let me tell you the story. Right. And I started in lending, and I spent 20 years in lending, stuck in the skill, talked to the finance people, right? And then I switched and I went to global sales operations, and it taught me negotiation skills and how to put together a sales package and how to negotiate and how to do all of those things, which has led me all here. Right. So what's your story that takes the skills that you have as a realtor that you can apply from your past life, whether it's education, right? I believe in educating people. I come from a customer service background, or I have a master's in business from CU, whatever it is, like, yeah. I almost thought there's an essence of development. You also have a story, and you all have things in your life and experiences that have brought you where you are today that allow you to answer that question. Now, I did get asked one time because the brother was a jerk and he knew how long I'd been in the business. And he asked me specifically how many homes I'd sold. I had a decent number, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't Brittany's level, right? And I remember saying, he was an executive for a very large company here in Denver. And I said, well, I said, it's funny you asked that. Because, you know, in the corporate world, we think time is the factor, right? He goes, well, of course, the longer you've been in the job, the better you are. And I said, well, here's what I've learned. The average realtor sells 4 homes a year. And while I may have only been in the business for a year, I have sold the equivalent of 7 years.
Do the math.
Right? But first of all, I knew that he was going to ask something like that, so I got my data pulled together. So again, if you know the information, it becomes very easy to counter the natural question into a positive for yourself. Right? So I know we kind of went off topic, but
Did you hire her bonus or did you?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I did it now looking back on it. There's one thing she didn't do. You never closed me.
No, I don't. Me too. Dang, you wanted the
Just need to know which is at that point, would you say, okay, I have a contract all filled out?
Yeah, so yeah, most of the time I do. So everything's like all digital, right? So usually I would say, great, I'll email you contracts tonight.
Okay.
And then that's it. But and I mean you need to be able to hit send. So
do you ever go to the contract and explain it to them? Have you ever?
I mean, to be very honest, in early my career, yes. Majority of our business is all repeat, so no. So Canada is 100%. And every time I send it, I'm like, let me know if you have any specific questions, I'll be able to go over it. Sign it. And so yeah, and normally like if it was like that's why I asked if she's ever sold a home before, because then that's one of the keys, like how much time do I have to spend on that? I've never gone over. Yeah.
Oh, Margaret helped me my first sales.
Yeah. And I think that's important, right?
You can ask questions, I can answer. Yeah, I've never gone through it.
Yeah. So I have a different opinion. I believe we should go through it because that's a contract, and if they don't understand it and they just blindly signed it, on one level you can say shame on them. Yeah. Right. However, if I'm truly their fiduciary and I go through every line item, oh my goodness, no. But I do go over the highlights, right? I do go over it, like especially when we're filling in the blanks, and it's more not as much. In their opinion, it's not that they can't read it and figure it out. It's you make sure I got this right. Here's what I'm showing as the inclusion. Here's what I'm showing as the exclusion. We've got 3 garage remotes, right? But like I'm going through the pieces of the listing agreement or the contract to buy and sell, so that they know what they're signing, at least at a high level. Yeah. Now, again, if it's the investor, like if I'm working with one of the investors who buys a house a month, I'm probably not going to do it. And I have those clients, but right now I seem to have every first-time home buyer there is. So thank you, Andy.
So I took a class, and this is not off topic, but I took a class from Army, Colorado the second time, and they have a checklist. They have like a form in there that you can take with you or fill out online while you're asking the questions at the listing appointment or while you're walking through the house of what all they're
check.
And I knew it, and I knew it was but I mean, it's a lot. You know, it's a big old thing. I didn't say it all. Yeah. But you don't know that. Yeah. If you can that you want to put on your listing, because that's where the problem is people's listings are very flawed, and so no one's even able to search sometimes for your listings. You want to be a little more detailed. But then you can go over that and then say, okay, now I went through this with you, did I get it right on that listing? Because that's where I always think is most important.
And that template's very important if you have a listing manager or a transaction manager who's doing it. You make sure over it. Yeah.
So you're trusting that everything got in, that you got everything in the list correctly. And I've gotten caught twice with
I think for like us, like a couple of questions, is there anything that you're taking with you that I need to know about, right? Like, because so I've had people take freaking like pictures. So like, so then I'm like, okay, but I need to come out now because that's what so like there are certain things, the well, I did just go to mediation 2 weeks ago, but prior to the only time I've ever been in mediation about to was over freaking video coverings. So I ask about race every freaking time because that's the one thing that people like to argue about is window covering.
Our neighbor had a mirror the whole time during all the showings. Then when they moved, they put the old mirror back up.
Yeah, that we did was. Yes.
We were there, we wanted to move in and do it. They're like, wait. I don't know, there's a place. Like,
we had on this too. Luckily, they said the same thing. I'm like, is there something that is in here that you're taking with you that I don't? And they're like, yes. That mirror in the bathroom is an antique from my grandma. I'm like, great. So put up a sign. This will be replaced with this mirror because I don't want to go to mediation.
Yeah.
Stop that.
Details are
All
important.
right, what other questions do you have about the listing consultation?
No, we're not, because I am hot and heavy in an overpriced listing right now, and it's not fun. So, yeah, I think just looking over it.
And then you can try the phone call.
Daily, the 3 times daily.
Yeah.
So, so Margaret helped me with the spreadsheet of feedback showing the, price high, and still not starting with me. We got it down, but it's not fun.
And I mean, do we take over prices? Well, getting better at not.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, I mean, like we took like 4 last year that we were like, we're not even working. I don't know what to do. Like, and so, but that's a hard position, especially if that's to a newer agent, right? Because you want a listing and you want to be able to have another post transaction and you want to have so I totally get it. And I should have never agreed to Stonebriar because I knew that was going to end in a bad deal. And it really, we lost the listing. We lost it in October and then it took them until February to sell it again. So it's just one of those things, and that's not how you want to build a reputation in the.
Everybody thinks their house is made of gold.
Yeah.
And it's finding data, but also kind ways to just, explain.
Well, one of the things I think that, and we didn't even talk about it, and the reason I asked Margaret what I thought her house was worth, right? Because everyone always thinks that they know what their house is worth. Zillow has her house listed at what, 483.
Yeah, it's
right?
either high or low.
It's either high or low. And you need to know how you need to have, like 483, 150.
That might be what I pay for.
It was interesting. And the reason is because it goes both ways, right? Like one of my girlfriend's dad passed away and they're trying to establish a value on their house. So where did they go? Zillow. And then she texted me and she's like, hey, I feel like this is really low. I'm like, all right, let me pull it. What's 100,000? But then on Margaret's, it's like really low. I think low too, like super low. And so one of the things that most people won't know on Zillow, they used to, maybe not now because they're a brokerage firm, they used to say how off they were. And like the Denver market was, they were traditionally off by 10%, which 10% is a huge number. It's a huge number. And so one of the things to battle a high price listing is, okay, well, buyers are going to go to Zillow and they're going to see that the house is only worth 483 and you want to be at 550. You have a problem.
But Zillow now adjusts to what
it does. Yeah. And so it's one of those things. Yeah, it is so funny. And so you just have to know what you're still working with. I think you just have to know what you're working with. And the biggest thing is the one thing with any listing is you just have to be prepared. Like you just have to be prepared. Like you have to know your comps. You have to know the condition of what's selling. You have to know what's active. Some like one of I was on a listing appointment 2 weeks ago, and he tells me like, well, the house right around the corner is sold for 1.2. I'm like, shit, that did not pull over my comps. So I went back and looked, and it's like 3,000 square foot bigger, and had a pool to 2-story. It's fun. It's not fun. So I think you have to And so sure, it's like, here's the reality. Like, if you're going bigger, it has a pool, it's 2-story, we're doing the ranch, and it's all like you're.
So it's human selective.
Yeah, it is. COVID, so like, really, as we all thought we were just in quarantine, like,
Yeah.
but we were, right? So, yeah, it's still like it, right?
3 years ago.
Yeah.
3 years ago today.
Yeah. 3 years ago. Yeah. Shame.
Oh my gosh. So with Zillow, one of my favorite things to say about Zillow is, you know, Zillow is nothing more than an aggregator of data. And it's fascinating to me that, did you know that the CEO of Zillow, on his particular home, the price was off by 50%. By the way, that's true. The CEO couldn't get his own house right in his tool. Right. I use that when people just are dying on this estimate, and I'll say, here's the reality, right? When you're trying to CEO makes his house value. So.
Yeah, Zillow hasn't been in your house, they don't know your view, they haven't been
Right,
They're just looking at data points and telling us. And it's not a number. And the other thing about data points is the number is only as good as the data they get. And so we all know that not every MLS listing is very accurate or complete. Like, people don't put in all the info. Like, I mean, if I'm looking for a ranch in Castle Rock, I can't just look for one levels, because there are people who put in a ranch in the basement as a 2-level home.
Right. Right.
Which is not accurate. So I mean,
Which has an age in doing that.
it's an age of doing that. So the data is only as good as the person who puts it in. And then Zillow is just taking all the data. So how can we, and the data is not going to be perfect, because it can't be.
But that's why you're the professional to be able to
Exactly. Yeah. We have to, like, okay, that's a guidepost over here, but it's just, you know, let's look at these numbers, and that's why I'm saying 520, not 480, right, or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
What other questions do you guys have?
This is very timely because I'm going to talk to my niece's mother-in-law tomorrow about right sizing her. So I felt pretty confident that I liked a lot of the things you did. So
Perfect. So I want to say, first of all, she was very prepared. She ran her comps on a house that she was not getting a listing on in real life. Right. But she pulled the data. She knew my house. Right. She knew what was going on in the neighborhood. I wasn't surprised by anything she said. Right. And so thank you for putting in the time.
Yeah, of course.
To come and do this for us. These truly are.
So there's no active listing. Should. And your example is that
my house.
and that should be.
No. Well, okay, so the information's real, but so let me just put quality. I'm not moving to Iowa in the near term. There was that true. So the state of Iowa has put in effect recently that retirement income, like my 401ks, is not taxable in the state. Now, federal still taxes, right? The thing is that it's my 401k that I didn't pay taxes on when it went into the 401k will not be taxable if I lived in Iowa when I pull it in. That's just things that when you get to be my age, you start wanting to pay attention to, especially when family and loved ones in that area. So yes, there was truth to everything I said, except that I was moving in September. I know, I could feel the tension. I've said 7 more years. 70 is the magic years.
Which is familiar now.
I think
because it builds confidence.
And you can have it printed out, like, you know, you're great, you got it memorized, that's awesome. And if it's your first listing appointment, like print out the MLS data and pull it up and show it to them. And a lot of times they'll, you know, they want to see something physical. So I think it's completely fine if you're not able to memorize it at the start. Yeah.
Well, and there's highlighting too. Like I'll take it and I'll highlight and say, okay, this is a larger lot. This is the 3-car garage. It doesn't have the finished base. Like, So it's like easy to like for me to go through it and be like, well, that's this and that, you know.
Do you take the actual MLS sheet or do you take like a spreadsheet where it's all together?
No, well, two things. So for my weekly updates spreadsheet that I do, and then but in the presentation, it'll just be like the broker showing sheet. So it doesn't have all the photo, it doesn't have all that. But I've gone through all of that. So what I normally would do is if I'm working with like 14 comparable properties, and the reality is in this moment in the market, I'm actually doing majority of pricing based on actives and not based on tweets. And so, but for Margaret specifically, there was literally no actives. I mean, I had to go 5 miles out to be able to kind of engage pricing with that. So I'm printing basically the broker showing sheet. And what I'm essentially looking for, if we're looking for obviously finished square footage, I'm looking for the garage, lot size, and then any updates. But then as I'm looking at pictures in MLS, I'm writing it down, like taking notes on it. And so I'm like, oh, this one has, you know, full kitchen remodel, less than 600 gold. Or so I can kind of base the condition. You can't see that quickly.
So one of the things that I learned from Diane Howard on that, right, is that when you're in the middle of that pricing discussion, right, and I was cognizant of time. I didn't push her too hard. I go, what do you mean, right? But what Diane does is she pulls up, she uses the cloud-based scanning, but I've done the same thing with printing out, colored print, you know, but with the photos. And so she'll say, okay, so this one, just as Brittany said, so this one is a little bit bigger, but as you can see from the pictures, right? This one's had a pretty full kitchen remodel because for some people, they need that visual, right? They need to be able to see that, right? And well, many of us in this room are very visual, right? And so to be able to pull that down, or like, I think if Ricky's computer would have been working, we might have been able to go there where we could pull them up.
Yeah.
And say, here's the photos, you know, here's the photos, and maybe you have this in most people, yeah. Right, here's the photos of this one, and here's the photos of this one, so that they can, I always try and get them to draw their own conclusion. And one of Diane's questions was to go through every property is, okay, so we went through the size differences, which in my house there wasn't a lot, but is this home similar to yours, nicer than yours, or not as nice as yours? And they'll say, oh, that was nicer because, right, okay, that goes in this pile. And then, okay, then she does the same thing with the next one. So then she has suddenly this spread, these comps sitting out. These aren't as nice, these are nicer, and these are it. So based on what we just looked at, where do you think she should draw the price? And I have done that when I knew going in, I was going to have a battle. And then they guess what? They self-discover.
Yeah.
Right. And that self-discovery, whether you're coaching people in behaviors or you're coaching people in pricing, they suddenly self-discover it's harder. So I have to run. I have a 2 o'clock call. You guys are welcome to stay. Yeah. If there's more questions.
Yeah, of course.
I may need to go back to what
What is the pull up the other one? Pull up the pictures on your phone.
I would. Yeah, I think it would be more impactful, like if you had a laptop,